You ended it. You know you did. The certainty held all day. It always does. Tonight, something went quiet that usually isn't. What you haven't said to anyone, what you haven't quite let yourself say, not in this exact form, not at this exact hour, is that the fear isn't whether you were right. You've answered that. You've answered it to your therapist, to the friend who asked twice, to yourself in the car on the way home from work. The answer hasn't changed. The fear is what the leaving revealed. That someone who loved without reservation, who loved the way people are supposed to love, would have found a way to stay, would have tried differently, or longer, or one more time, and that you didn't, and that when it was finally over, underneath everything else, there was something that felt like setting something heavy down, quietly, without much resistance, and that the quiet ease of that, relative, unwilled, real, is a kind of evidence you haven't been ready to look at directly. You told the people who asked that you were doing better. They believed you because you said it like someone who meant it. They don't know you are lying here with the phone face down on the mattress because a photo surfaced tonight and you looked at it longer than you should have and then had to turn it over and still haven't decided what to do with it and cannot put it further away than arm's reach. This is a room you chose. You know every object in it. You put each one where it is, and tonight, for a moment, you feel like a trespasser in it, like the person who lives here made a decision you are still catching up to, and the room already knows something you are still working out. There is no script for this part. Everything built for this situation was built to help you leave. Nothing was built for afterward. Nothing prepared you for the specific weight of lying awake, not with regret, but with something that has no clean name, something descending in the gut, looking for a floor that keeps not arriving. Nothing is being asked of you here. This space doesn't need a version of you that has it together. No one is measuring you in this room. You are allowed to arrive exactly as unfinished as you are. The light coming through the curtains is gray-blue, borrowed from the city, not quite dark, not anywhere near morning. Halfway. The shapes in this room are recognizable but slightly wrong in their proportions. The way a familiar place looks when you have been awake too long. Notice the pressure just below your sternum, not sharp, not burning, simply occupying the space it has always occupied, the dull resonance of something not fully healed, like pressing a bruise you keep forgetting is there. Let it be slightly more present for one breath, acknowledged rather than held at arm's length, and then, without forcing anything, fractionally less insistent, not gone, just no longer braced against. The air in this room has been yours long enough that it has taken on the temperature of your skin. You cannot find the edge of yourself in it. The warmth and the discomfort have become indistinguishable, and for now, that is allowed. You do not need to locate the boundary tonight. Somewhere in this building, someone sets a mug down on a wooden surface. A soft, definite sound, the small conclusion of someone finishing something ordinary. A light goes off in a window across the street. A life arranging itself for sleep without difficulty, without asking anything of the dark. Welcome to Soulnest. Together, we leave the noise behind and simply let the world exist without us. You keep thinking about someone you chose to leave, not someone who left you, someone you decided with full awareness to walk away from. That distinction is doing something to you tonight. The mind is supposed to move on from its own decisions. It files completed things away. The grocery run, the argument you won, the email you finally sent. But this one, it keeps retrieving, opening, scanning through again. Not because it found an error, because it hasn't finished processing what the decision cost. And the mind cannot mark something complete until the emotional weight catches up to the cognitive conclusion. That process has no fixed timeline. It does not care that you already know what you chose. Your thumb is resting above the face-down phone, not moving. This is a decision too. The decision not to pick it up, which is its own kind of choosing, which is exhausting when you have been choosing all day. You already decided about the relationship. Now you are deciding about the phone. Now you are deciding whether deciding about the phone means something about the relationship. The mind is efficient like that. It finds weight everywhere. You already know what the photo looks like. You do not need to look at it to see it. That is the specific cruelty of memory. It requires no cooperation from you. The face arrives without being called. The exact angle of a laugh you have not heard in 4 months. You did not choose to remember it. You chose to end things, which is different. The mind did not get that memo and has been filing its own objections ever since. Here is something no one says. The mind returning to a decision is not evidence of doubt. It is evidence of weight. Heavy things do not just get put down. They require the body to adjust, to find a new posture, to learn what it feels like to carry less. What you are feeling right now in your hands, the slight damp at the center of your palm, the restless pressure of fingers that do not know what to do at this hour, is not regret looking for an exit. It is the body still adjusting, still finding the new posture. The obsessive return is not the mind telling you that you are wrong. It is the mind doing its slowest, most necessary work, reconciling what was decided with what was real. The relationship was real. The goodness in it was real. The ending was also real. The mind is not confused about this. It is trying to hold all three at once, and it is very slow at that particular task, and it will work through the night if you let it, going over and over the same terrain until some internal accounting is satisfied that nothing was missed. You do not have to help it. You do not have to speed it up or talk it out of anything. The mind will do what the mind does. Tonight, the only thing being asked of you is this. Let your thumb rest where it is. The phone does not need a decision right now. Neither do you. Neither does the grief. What you are feeling right now has no clean name in the language available to you, because the language available to you was built for a different kind of loss. The kind where something was taken. The kind where you can say, I lost someone, and people know how to respond. They bring food. They ask how you are doing. They do not require you to explain the mechanics of the sadness. That grief has infrastructure. Yours does not. When you end something, the grief is still real. The missing is still real. The 3 a.m. inventory of small things, the way they laughed at something stupid, the specific weight of their presence in a room, All of that is still real, but you cannot quite claim it. You were the one who decided. And somewhere in the back of every conversation about how you are doing is the unspoken accounting. You chose this, which means the grief is yours, but the full sympathy is not. And somehow that compounds it, the way a bruise compounds when you press it and then press it again. The ceiling fan turns. 3 rotations, then a faint click, irregular enough that you cannot tune it out. You only started using it after they were gone. They were always cold, and the compromise was never running it, and now there is no compromise to keep. You did not notice the first time you turned it on. You noticed later, much later, when you realized you had learned the click. When you understood that the rhythm was now yours to keep track of, alone. That is a small thing. It is also not a small thing. The loneliness of this specific grief is not only about missing the person, it is about having no legitimate place to put the missing. The people who love you are quietly relieved you ended it. You could see it in their faces, the careful exhale, I think this is really good for you. They are not wrong, and they are also not the right audience for the part of you that is awake at this hour, turning over the texture of what you had and what it cost to put it down. So you do not tell them, which means the grief lives only in you, which means it has nowhere to go, which means it arrives at 3 a.m. and finds you exactly where you are now, lying in the room you chose, alone with something no one knows quite how to name alongside you. Here is the thing about grief that belongs to a decision. It does not move faster because you made the right call. It moves at grief's pace, which is slow and interested in detail, and completely indifferent to your reasoning. The mind that is so practiced at justification goes quiet in grief's presence. Grief does not argue. It simply arrives and sits. You are allowed to miss someone you chose not to be with anymore. The choosing and the missing are not in contradiction. They are 2 separate true things that happen to live in the same body, in the same room, at the same hour, with the fan turning its 3 rotations and the click arriving whether you are listening or not. And the hardest part is that you cannot point to anything. The room sits in its gray-blue half-light, the curtains holding back the city without quite managing it. Shapes visible but slightly wrong, the familiar made strange in the way familiar things get when you have been awake with them too long. The room looks like a rendering of itself, almost right. And what you left was almost right too. That is the problem you have been carrying without a name for it. There was no dramatic wrongness, no clear villain, no event that would make sense in the retelling. If someone asked you tonight, really asked, pressed past the diplomatic version, you would have to say something like, "It was quietly not enough for a long time, in ways I could never make visible to anyone, including myself." And that sentence sounds, even to you, like an excuse dressed up as an explanation. The culture has a word for relationships you leave because of cruelty. It does not have a word for leaving something that was genuinely good and persistently, privately wrong. The pressure below your sternum is familiar now, that dull, bruise-like resonance, not sharp enough to name as pain, just occupying the space it has always occupied. This is what quiet misalignment feels like from the inside. Not agony, not absence, but a sustained low frequency of something not fitting. You spent a long time wondering if you were the problem, if you were the one who did not know how to fit. Maybe you were. That is not a question that gets answered tonight either. But here is what is true. A relationship does not need to have been terrible to have been wrong for you. That sentence should be more obvious than it is. We understand intuitively that a shoe can be the wrong size without being a bad shoe. We do not demand that the shoe injure us before we acknowledge it does not fit. And yet somehow, with people, with years, with someone who loved you and whom you loved back in the particular way you were capable of, we require the evidence to be catastrophic before we grant ourselves permission to name the misalignment as real. The specific honesty it took to say this is not working and I cannot make it work. That honesty did not come cheaply. You sat with it for a long time before you believed it. You tested it repeatedly, held it up to different lights, waited to see if it would change. It did not change. The low-frequency wrongness was still there in the mornings, still there after good weekends, still there when everything looked, from the outside, exactly like something you should want. The gray-blue light makes the room look like memory. Everything slightly off scale, familiar and not. This is what you were living in. A version of a life that was almost the right one, the proportions not quite matching the shape you knew yourself to be. You do not need a monster in this story for the leaving to have made sense. You only need the truth of what it felt like from inside. Quiet, persistent, and real. That is enough of a reason. It always was. And then, without warning, the name arrives. Not summoned. Not the result of thinking about them. You are not thinking about them, or you are trying not to, which is a different thing that produces the same result. The name simply appears, the way names do at this hour, stripped of everything that normally surrounds it. No face attached yet, no memory, just the name, sounding in the interior of the skull the way it would sound in an empty room. You notice it the way you notice a sound you cannot immediately place, with a kind of suspended attention, waiting to understand what it means that it arrived. It means nothing diagnostic. That is the thing the 12 a.m. version of your mind cannot quite accept. The name arriving is not the unconscious sending a message. It is not evidence, not instruction, not your deeper self trying to correct the decision your surface self made. The name arrives because it was, for a long time, one of the most frequently used words in your interior life. It arrived in the middle of grocery lists. It arrived when you saw something that would have made them laugh. It arrived hundreds of times a day in the ordinary background hum of a life lived alongside another person. The mind does not retire a word just because the circumstance has changed. It takes considerably longer than 4 months. Longer, probably, than feels fair. The city outside makes its low, continuous sound. The sound that became yours alone. The sound they never slept next to. You notice the warmth of the room, how it has absorbed you so completely that you cannot find the edge of yourself in it. The air indistinguishable from your own skin. The name sits in this. It does not require anything from you. It is simply present, the way the city is present. the way the room is present, part of the atmosphere of this particular night. Here is the specific cruelty and the specific gift of it. You cannot hear someone say the name back. That is what makes it ring differently at 12 a.m. than it does at noon. At noon, there is noise enough to absorb it. Here, there is only the interior of your own head, and the name and the specific quality of silence that follows a name when no one answers it. You are, in this moment, the only person alive who is thinking about them at precisely this pitch, in precisely this register. That is not nothing. It is a strange, uncomfortable form of intimacy with a person you chose to leave. The pressure low in your chest, that familiar bruise-adjacent weight, shifts fractionally when the name arrives. Not worse, just present in a different way, more located, less diffuse. The body recognizing the source of what it has been carrying. The name is not a verdict. It is not the mind saying you are wrong, or that you should call, or that anything needs to change. It is simply the mind confirming what you already know. The person was real. The years were real. Real things leave marks in the mind the way furniture leaves marks in carpet. The impression remains long after the object has been moved. The name is that impression. It is proof of something that happened. It is not proof of anything else. It is not proof of anything. The algorithm certainly didn't think so. The notification arrived the way they always do, without preamble, without awareness of what it was walking into. A memory from 3 years ago. The phone does not know what 3 years ago was. It does not know what the photo cost to look at, or what it cost to turn over, or that you have been lying here for the better part of an hour with the weight of it face down beside you. The phone is running a program. The program surfaces old photos. It has no idea it handed you a small grenade and then went back to sleep. You looked at it. That is the part you keep returning to. Not the notification itself, but the moment before you turned it over. The few seconds of looking. You did not look away immediately, which feels, in the accounting, your mind is running tonight, like a confession of something. You are not sure what. The photo showed a version of the two of you that was real, genuinely, uncomplicatedly real. The kind of real that exists in photos from the middle of things before anyone knows how they end. You are not performing happiness in it. You are simply there in an ordinary moment with someone you had not yet decided to leave. The dropping sensation in the gut arrived the moment you recognized it. Low, slow, that familiar weight beginning its descent toward a floor that keeps not materializing. You know this feeling now. You know it is not the body telling you that you made a mistake. You know this, and the knowing does not stop the sensation, because the body does not update in real time based on your conclusions. It is running older software. Here is the thing about a photo surfacing. It proves only that something happened. It does not grade the something. It does not evaluate whether the something should have continued, whether you were right to end it, whether the ending was handled with sufficient care. A photo is evidence of a moment, not a verdict on the years that followed it. The past is permitted to have been real and still be over. These are not contradictions. They are simply what it means for time to pass. The curtains hold their gray-blue borrowed light. The room sits in its familiar half-dark, shapes at their slightly wrong proportions. The phone lies where you put it, face down, not asking anything of you. The hands in your lap have gone still now, the restless turning quieted to something closer to waiting. The sternum holds its dull pressure, present, not escalating, simply occupying the space it has occupied all night. You looked at the photo because you are a person who was in something real, and the evidence of that real thing surfaced, and you looked at it the way anyone looks at evidence of something that mattered. That is not weakness. It is not backsliding. It is not your unconscious trying to redirect you. It is simply the completely ordinary experience of encountering proof that your life contained something and feeling the weight of that proof and then turning it back over because you already know what you know. The photo has not changed anything. It was never going to. But what it changed was nothing. And what it confirmed was simply that you still miss them. You are allowed to say that. You are allowed to hold it plainly, without immediately moving to qualify it, without adding, "But I know it was right," or "But I'm doing better," or any of the other clauses you attach to it when you say it out loud to people who are watching your face for signs of backsliding. In this room, at this hour, with no one watching, you miss them. That is a complete sentence. It does not require a subordinate clause to make it acceptable. The air in the room has settled to exactly your temperature. You cannot find where the room ends and where you begin. The warmth is entirely your own, reflected back from the walls, from the curtains that were never quite thick enough, so that you are breathing yourself back in and cannot locate the edge of yourself in it. This is what the missing feels like from the inside. Not a sharp external thing pressing inward, but a warmth that has become indistinguishable from your own atmosphere. You cannot separate the missing from the self because it has been in here long enough to absorb your heat. Nobody tells you this is allowed. The cultural script for leaving someone goes roughly as follows. You make the decision, you grieve briefly and appropriately, you arrive at a place of hard-won clarity, and the clarity replaces the missing. What the cultural script leaves out, because it is, frankly, more interested in resolution than accuracy, is that the missing does not consult the clarity before arriving. They occupy different rooms entirely. The clarity lives in the part of you that knows what you know in the daytime. The missing lives here in the 3 a.m. part, and it is not confused, and it is not a mistake. It is simply the other true thing. The English language does not have a clean way to say "I miss someone I was right to leave." The sentence sounds like it needs fixing, like one half should cancel the other. But that is a grammatical failure, not an emotional one. Other things coexist without canceling each other. Weather systems, competing instincts, the pressure below your sternum that is both familiar and still slightly wrong in a way that has no name. Two true things can live in the same body. They do not need to resolve into one. The loosening that happens when you stop requiring them to cancel each other is not dramatic. It is not a wave of something lifting. It is more like the moment when you stop holding a breath you did not know you were holding, a fractional shift in the chest, the sternum's familiar pressure settling 1 degree lower, the body adjusting to carrying something it no longer has to pretend is not there. You miss them. You also know what you know. Both of these are true tonight, in this room, in this borrowed gray-blue light that belongs to neither dark nor morning. You do not have to choose which one is real. You do not have to make them fight it out and report back with a winner. They are both already here. There is room enough for both. And underneath both of them, the missing and the knowing, there is the thing you have been less willing to name. You hurt someone. That is a fact, not a verdict. And the difference between those two things matters more than anything else in this room tonight. A fact is something that happened. A verdict is a conclusion about what the fact means about who you are. The guilt you are carrying has been doing the work of both, presenting itself as a fact while quietly functioning as a verdict, collapsing the harm you caused into a statement about your character, your capacity, the fundamental question of whether you are the kind of person who does this sort of thing. You are. You did. But that is not the same as being defined by it, and the distinction is not a technicality. The dropping sensation is low in the gut, that slow, descending weight that has been with you since the opening, looking for a floor that keeps not materializing. You know this feeling now. It is not falling. It is the specific physical signature of holding something you cannot put down and cannot resolve, something that moves through you in slow descent without completing its arrival. This is where the guilt lives, not in the chest, not in the throat, in the gut, low, where the body stores the things it cannot process through language. Guilt is a story the mind constructs around harm. The story goes, you caused pain, therefore something is revealed, therefore the revealed thing is damning. The story feels like logic. It has the structure of logic, premise, implication, conclusion. What it is missing is accuracy. The premise is true. You caused pain. The implication does not follow. Pain caused by an honest decision made from a real place is not the same as pain caused by carelessness or cruelty or indifference to the other person's interior life. You are not indifferent. The fact that you are awake at this hour, with this specific weight in this specific location in your body, is evidence of exactly the opposite. The person you left was hurt. You can look at that directly. You can hold it without flinching, without the elaborate scaffolding of justification, without needing it to mean less than it means. They were hurt. That is true. It sits in the room with you, heavy and real, the same way the phone sits on the mattress. Present, undeniable, not going anywhere. You do not need to minimize it to survive it. The harm was real, and so was the place it came from, and both things can be true, and neither one cancels the other. Here is the distinction that matters. You can acknowledge harm without accepting a verdict. You can say, I hurt someone without completing the sentence with, and that makes me someone who hurts people as a fundamental condition of my character. The first is a fact about an action. The second is a story about an identity. Guilt wants you to believe they are the same sentence. They are not. The weight in the gut does not lift with this. It is not that kind of knowing, but it shifts, slightly, the way a carried thing shifts when you adjust your grip. Still present, held differently. The floor still not arriving, but the descent for a moment fractionally slower. And somewhere in the slower descent, the words surface again. Your own voice, arriving in the interior of the skull the way it does at this hour, slightly flattened like a recording of a recording, the original warmth pressed out of it by repetition. You have rehearsed this enough times that the words no longer sound like yours. They sound like a transcript of yours, which is a different thing. A transcript carries the content without the hesitation, the particular silence before the difficult sentence, the way your voice did something involuntary when you finally said the part you had been working up to for weeks. The transcript cannot hold any of that. It gives you back only what was said, not what it cost to say it. You do not remember it exactly. This is the specific torment of the last conversation, that you will never have access to the definitive version, the one you could examine closely and assess with confidence. Memory has already been editing it, smoothing some edges, sharpening others, making certain moments more cinematic than they were, and flattening others that probably mattered more. The hands rest against each other now, the slight dampness at the center of the palm a familiar texture. The restlessness quieted to something more like waiting. Waiting to know if what you said was enough. Whether you said it well enough, carefully enough, honestly enough. The answer to that question is not coming tonight. Here is what is true about last conversations. No one has ever had a good one. This is not consolation. It is simply fact. The last conversation is structurally impossible to do well because it is required to carry more weight than any conversation is designed to hold. It must contain the ending and the explanation and the acknowledgement of what was real and the care for the person on the other side of it, all simultaneously in real time, while your own interior is in significant distress and the other person is hearing something they did not want to hear. The conditions are not compatible with eloquence. No one exits a last conversation thinking, "Yes, that was exactly right." Everyone exits thinking of the sentence they should have said differently. The words arrive again, slightly flattened. You let them. You do not try to fix them this time. Do not insert the better version over the top of the actual version. The actual version is what you had at that specific moment. The courage you had, the clarity you had, the language you could access under the particular pressure of that particular hour. The ending you gave was built from what you actually possessed, not from what you wished you possessed in retrospect. Those are different inventories. The impulse to wish you had said it better, that impulse is worth examining, not for what it reveals about your failure, but for what it reveals about your care. You are not rehearsing this because you are indifferent to how it landed. You are rehearsing it because it mattered to you that it land with some measure of honesty, some measure of dignity for both of you. That impulse belongs to someone who was trying, not to someone who was not. The words will arrive again. Let them be what they were. They were the ending you were capable of. That is not nothing. And underneath the ending you were capable of, there was something you have not said out loud to anyone. There was relief. Not triumph, not indifference. Relief. The specific, unwilled lightness that arrived when it was finally over, when the conversation had ended and you were alone and the sustained, impossible thing had stopped being sustained. You felt it before the grief arrived, in the gap between the ending and the understanding of what the ending meant. A few seconds, maybe longer, of something setting down. and then you felt it again in quieter ways in the days that followed. The absence of a particular tension you had been holding so long you had forgotten it was tension. The dropping sensation is still there, low in the gut, that familiar slow descent. But notice it differently tonight. The floor not arriving is not only anguish, it is also the body still in motion, still adjusting to a weight that has genuinely shifted. Something was set down. The descent is what settling feels like from the inside, before the settling completes. You have not finished arriving at the new configuration. That is not the same as being wrong about the direction. The relief is the admission that has been sitting underneath everything else tonight, waiting. It is the one you cannot say to the people who ask how you are doing, because they will either reassure you too quickly, of course you feel relieved, it was the right thing, or they will file it as evidence against your grief, as if the two cannot coexist, as if feeling lighter when something ended means the something did not matter. You already know from chapter 6 that two true things can live in the same body. The relief and the missing are both in the room. They have been here all along. Here is what the relief was actually about. Not the person, but the staying. You had been staying inside something that required a sustained, low-grade effort to remain inside. The effort of adjusting, of accommodating the misalignment, of performing a version of fine that was not quite accurate. That effort had a cost you were paying so regularly you had stopped noticing it as a cost. When it ended, what lifted was not your feeling for them. What lifted was the effort. The relief was the body registering the end of something it had been working hard to maintain. That is a physical response to the cessation of strain. It is not a confession about the depth of what you felt. The warmth of the room sits at your temperature, indistinguishable from your own skin. The curtains hold the city's pale suggestion of light. The phone lies where you put it, not asking anything. And the descent in the gut, that long, slow movement toward a floor that keeps not arriving, is simply the body still finding its new weight, still locating where things settle when a sustained effort stops. You are not finished settling. That is what the dropping sensation is. Not evidence of wrongness, evidence of motion. The body rearranging itself around something that is genuinely different now, genuinely lighter, in ways that will take longer than tonight to complete. The floor is still not here, but it is somewhere below you, and you are moving toward it, and that is not nothing either. And somewhere on the way toward it, a phrase surfaces, uninvited, slightly absurd in its inadequacy, protecting your peace. You have heard this said. You may have said it yourself in the months before the decision, trying to build a framework sturdy enough to act from. It arrived in the vocabulary of people who love you, offered with genuine care, as a way of giving you permission to do what you were already considering. It is not a bad phrase. It is a phrase designed for a specific purpose, to help someone who is afraid to leave, to give the leaving a name that feels dignified rather than destructive. As a tool for that purpose, it functions adequately. What it was never designed for is the 12 a.m. version of this, the after. The part where you are lying in the room you chose with the fan turning its 3 rotations and the city humming its indifferent hum outside, and you are not yours lives in the before. It has no syntax for the person who chose and is now awake inside the choosing, carrying something the vocabulary of choosing never prepared them for. The hands rest against each other, slightly damp at the center of the palm. The restlessness that has nowhere to go concentrated into that small warmth. The sternum holds its familiar pressure, not sharp, not escalating, just present in the way things are present when they have been there long enough to become part of the room's atmosphere. You reached for the available language and found it sitting there, useless. A hammer in a room that needed something else entirely. This is a specific frustration that has no name either, which is almost funny. The language fails you, and there is no language for the failure of language. Here is what happened. An entire cultural vocabulary was constructed around the moment of leaving. Know your worth. Walk away. You cannot pour from an empty vessel. These phrases were built by people who understood that leaving is hard, that it requires permission, that the person who stays too long needs something to hold on to. They are not wrong about that. What they did not build, what no one particularly bothered to build, was language for afterward, for the person who left and is now living inside the consequence of having left. That person was assumed to be fine, assumed to be, by definition, the one who made it out. The vocabulary stopped at the door. You did not stop at the door. You walked through it and kept going, and now you are here in a room on the other side, carrying something the vocabulary cannot name. That is not a failure of your feeling. It is a failure of the available tools. The ceiling fan turns, click. 3 rotations, click. The city outside continues its complete indifference to whether any of this gets resolved tonight. The curtains hold their pale borrowed light, the room halfway between dark and dawn as it has been all night. You are not carrying the wrong thing. You were simply handed the wrong words for it. Those are not the same problem, and only one of them is yours. And the one that is yours has weight. That has always been the evidence of something. The fan turns, 3 rotations, the click, 3 rotations, the click. You have been hearing it all night as the sound of an absence, the particular absence you made, the one that made the fan possible in the first place, because they were always cold and now there is no one to be cold. But listen to it differently for a moment, not as absence, as rhythm, a rhythm that is simply here in this room, turning at its own pace, belonging to no negotiation, requiring no compromise. The click arrives on schedule. It has been arriving on schedule all night. It is, in the quieter register of this hour, starting to sound less like loss and more like yours. The room running on its own terms. The room that is now entirely, uncomplicatedly yours. The grief you are carrying tonight has been presenting itself as evidence. Evidence of wrongness, of mistake, of something that should not have been done. This is the move guilt makes. It borrows the language of consequence and uses it to argue backward toward the decision. It hurt this much, therefore it was wrong. The logic sounds airtight. It is not airtight. It is a confusion of 2 separate things, the cost of a decision and the quality of a decision. These are not the same category. Consider what a costless decision looks like. A costless decision is one where nothing real was at stake, where the ending carried no weight because the thing being ended had no weight. You end a magazine subscription without losing sleep. You cancel a reservation and feel nothing by morning. These are decisions without cost because they are decisions about things that did not matter enough to cost anything. The grief you are carrying is not the grief of a costless decision. It is the grief of something that was real and weighty and worth grieving, and you are grieving it, which is exactly what a person does when they end something that mattered. The pressure low in the sternum, that familiar bruise-adjacent resonance, is not the body's way of flagging an error. It is the body's way of registering that something substantial passed through it. Real things leave marks. Real relationships, even ones that were quietly and persistently wrong, do not end cleanly. They end with this: a room in the early hours, a fan turning, a weight that keeps finding new places to settle. That weight is not an indictment. It is a receipt. A decision that cost nothing was not a real decision. You made a real one. It cost something real. Those two facts are not in tension. They are the same fact, stated twice. The cost is the confirmation of the reality, not the evidence against the necessity. The click arrives again. 3 rotations. You notice it differently now. Not as the sound of someone who is always cold, but as the sound of a room that has learned to run on its own. A room that made an adjustment. A room that is, in its small mechanical way, doing exactly what you are doing. Finding the new rhythm and keeping time. The rhythm is yours. It has been yours for a while now. Tonight, for the first time, it sounds like it. Tonight, for the first time, it sounds like it. And the city outside is part of the same sound. Listen to it. Not as backdrop, not as the indifferent hum it has been all night, but as something more specific. The city that became yours alone. Every sound reaching this window passed through air that the person you left never breathed in this context. They did not sleep next to this particular frequency of the city. The way the traffic thins at this hour, the specific pitch of distance that settles in after midnight when the closer sounds have quieted. This is not the city you shared. That city existed in a different configuration of your life. This one arrived afterward unceremoniously, the way inherited things do. Not given, simply present, simply yours because the circumstances that made it yours had already occurred. You did not ask for this version of the room. You chose to end the relationship, which is different from choosing the specific 3 a.m. inheritance that came with it. This particular dark, this particular quiet. These curtains that were never quite thick enough holding the city's pale suggestion at bay. No one chooses the exact shape of what they are left with after a decision. They choose the decision. The rest arrives as consequence, filling the space the decision opened, not always in the form you imagined. The sternum holds its familiar pressure, present, not escalating, simply occupying the space it has occupied all night. The room is warm with only your warmth now, the air absorbed so completely into your temperature that you cannot find where you end and the room begins. This is what possession feels like from the inside. Not triumphant, not expansive, just the quiet fact of a space that has taken on your exact heat. The room has learned you. It does not know what to do with you yet, perhaps, but it has learned you. Here is the inventory, without judgment. This room is yours. The fan running at the temperature you want is yours. The city seen through one window by one person is yours. The particular silence where a second person's breathing used to be, that is yours too, which is uncomfortable, and also simply true. You did not ask for the silence. You asked to leave, and the silence came with it. The way certain costs are only legible after the transaction is complete. This is not gratitude. It is too early for gratitude, and gratitude is not what this chapter is asking of you. It is asking something simpler and harder. Acknowledgement. The life you are living now is not a consolation version of some better life you forfeited. It is simply the actual life, the one that exists, the one you are inside, the one made of this room and this city and this hour and this specific configuration of what is real. Actual things are always where you start. You cannot start from anywhere else. The city continues outside. It does not know your situation. It has never known your situation. It is simply there, producing its low, continuous sound, belonging to no one, and therefore available to whoever is listening. Tonight you are listening. Tonight it is yours, the way the room is yours, the way the hour is yours. You are, in fact, already here. This counts as a place to be. And from here, from this place that counts as a place, you can feel the weight more honestly. The duvet lies across the hips with the particular heaviness of something that has settled in for the night. Not uncomfortable, just present. The specific gravity of fabric and warmth at the widest point of the body against the mattress, where the body is most itself, most dense, most committed to the horizontal. The mattress has learned this shape, one person's shape, pressed in over weeks and months, the specific indentation of a body that has been lying here alone long enough to leave a mark. The weight of the duvet is not the weight of loss. It is simply the weight of what is. You have been carrying something else alongside it all night. The weight of having hurt someone, not the guilt. You have been working with guilt, examining it, separating it from the fact underneath it. The fact underneath it is this. The person you left experienced pain because of a choice you made. That is not a story. That is not a verdict. It is simply what happened, and it has a weight, and you have been carrying it. And tonight, you are allowed to set it down on the mattress beside you and look at it plainly. The mind wants to do one of two things with the weight of having caused pain. It wants to inflate it into a verdict about who you are, to let it become the defining evidence in a case against your character. Or it wants to minimize it, to explain it away so thoroughly that the pain you caused stops being real enough to feel. Both of these are ways of not carrying it. The inflation is too much. The minimizing is too little. What is left in the middle is the actual weight, real, appropriate, not a punishment and not an accusation. Just the natural gravity of having mattered to someone and then changed the terms. People who do not take love seriously do not carry this weight. They set things down easily, move on without the 3 a.m. accounting, sleep without the fan turning and the click arriving on its irregular schedule. The carrying is not evidence of guilt in the legal sense. It is evidence of seriousness, of having understood that another person's interior life was real and that what you did inside it had consequences that belong to you. That is not a small thing to understand. Most people spend considerable effort avoiding it. You are not avoiding it. You are lying here with the full weight of it, the duvet heavy across the hips, the room warm with your warmth, and you are not trying to make the weight lighter than it is or heavier than it is. You are just carrying it. That is the most honest relationship you can have with something you cannot undo. Carrying is not penance. It is not a sentence you are serving. It is what remains when you have been real with someone and the being real had a cost for them. The weight is the cost made physical, made permanent enough to hold. You carry it not because you must, but because you are the kind of person who understands that it belongs to you. That kind of person is not the kind of person who does not love. Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. And quite the opposite of a villain too, which is the other story the mind has been auditioning. Press your thumb into the center of your opposite palm. Not hard, just enough to feel the pressure returning pressure. This is a deliberate act now, not the unconscious anchoring it was at the start of the night when the vertigo was highest. The body asking its private question, am I still here? And answering, yes. Here, in this room, in this specific configuration of what is real, a person, not a character in a moral story, a person which is considerably more complicated and considerably less satisfying as a narrative category. The mind is very attached to moral categories when it comes to leaving. It wants you in one of two roles: the villain, who caused harm without sufficient justification and should bear the weight of that indefinitely, or the hero, who finally did the hard thing, who prioritized what was necessary, who should feel, by now, something closer to vindication than this. You have tried both. The villain frame arrived first and has been the more persistent tenant. The hero frame got offered to you by people who love you and sits badly. Too clean, too resolved, requiring a confidence in the rightness of everything that you do not have access to at 3 a.m. and are not sure you want. Neither fits. This is not a failure of imagination. It is an accurate reading of the situation. What actually happened is this: a person with a specific history, a specific capacity for honesty, a specific level of courage available on that specific day, made a decision about a relationship that was real and good in parts and persistently wrong in ways that were difficult to name and impossible to fix. The decision caused harm. It also ended something that needed ending. Both things are true, and neither truth resolves neatly into hero or villain, because those categories were designed for stories, and this is not a story. This is a life. Lives are considerably messier than the mind finds comfortable. The pressure of thumb against palm, mild and definite. The sternum's familiar weight, still present but no longer escalating. It has found its level for tonight. The city outside continues its low, continuous sound, indifferent and steady, the sound that belongs to no narrative about you whatsoever. The room in its gray-blue borrowed light holds you without comment. Releasing the compulsion to be either villain or hero is not the same as letting yourself off. Let that be clear. You are not being asked to decide that the harm you caused did not matter, or that the grief you carry is unwarranted, or that the whole thing was clean. You are being asked to stop requiring it to have a moral shape it does not have, to see it as it was, a human decision made by a human person in the full and complicated conditions of an actual life. That is not absolution, it is accuracy. The thumb presses, the palm returns the pressure. You are here, not villain, not hero. A person who did something difficult and real, who is still here in the aftermath of it, who has been awake all night with the full weight of having chosen. That person is allowed to be here. That person is, in fact, exactly here. And here, exactly, is where the grief lives alongside everything else. The air in the room has settled to your temperature in a different way than it did earlier tonight. Early in the night, it felt like dissolution, the warmth pressing in, the edges of yourself lost, the discomfort of not knowing where you ended. Now the same indistinction has shifted register. The room's warmth and your warmth are the same warmth, and tonight that feels less like being consumed and more like being held. The room having learned you completely, requiring nothing further from you, simply surrounding you with the temperature of your own presence. You do not need to locate the edge of yourself right now. The edge is wherever it is. It will still be there in the morning. The grief is still here too. This is the thing that needs to be said directly, without softening. The grief does not go away because you have spent the night finding better frames for it. It is still in the room. The sternum's familiar weight, the low settling that has been moving through the gut since the beginning. These have not resolved. They are quieter than they were in phase 1, but they are present, and they will be present tomorrow and the night after that. The grief is not a problem you have been solving over the course of this night. It is a fact you have been learning to be with. Here is what the mind has been unable to accept, and what this chapter is finally willing to say plainly. Grief does not mean you were wrong. The body does not issue grief as a verdict. It issues grief as a response, a proportionate, honest, appropriate response to real loss. What was lost was real. The relationship was real. The goodness in it was real, alongside everything that was wrong. And real things, when they end, produce grief. The necessity of the ending does not exempt the loss from being mourned. A necessary amputation is still an amputation. The surgeon who performs it correctly does not feel nothing. The correct performance of a difficult thing and the grief about its cost are not in contradiction. They are both appropriate responses to the same event. The mind has been trying to get you to choose. Either the grief means you were wrong or you were not wrong, and therefore should not be grieving. This is a false construction. It was always a false construction. The grief and the knowledge that the ending was necessary are not opposites. They are two honest responses to a situation that genuinely contained both loss and necessity. You do not have to collapse one to validate the other. The room holds its warmth around you. The curtains hold their gray-blue suggestion of a city that is simply there, indifferent and continuous. The fan turns its quiet rotations. The The grief is present. The knowledge is also present. Both are sitting in the same room, in the same body, in the same borrowed light, and neither is canceling the other tonight, and neither needs to. You are allowed to grieve what you chose to end. That sentence is not a paradox. It is simply an accurate description of what it means to have been in something real, and to have ended it honestly, and to be a person who feels the weight of both. And a person who feels the weight of both is already doing the thing that has no name yet, already living inside the decision rather than standing outside it, waiting for it to become something easier to inhabit. The hands are still now, not resolved. There is no resolution available tonight, but still. The slight dampness at the center of the palm, that concentrated warmth that has been there all night, is simply present without demanding anything. Earlier, the hands were turning against each other, restless, the body trying to act when action had already finished. Now they have arrived at something closer to rest, not because the question has been answered, because the body has begun to understand that the night does not require them to do anything further. The hands are allowed to simply be hands. They are doing that now. This is what living inside an irreversible decision actually looks like, from the inside. Not a dramatic acceptance, not a moment of clarity that reorganizes everything, but this, a gradual, unremarkable settling. The body growing heavier against the mattress, the breath finding its own pace without being managed, the hands going still, the questions still present, still unresolved, but no longer requiring you to stand over it with your full attention at 3 a.m. The decision is the same decision it was this morning and will be the same decision tomorrow morning. You do not have to keep confirming it. It is already made. There is a specific terror in irreversibility that has nothing to do with whether the decision was sound. It is simply the terror of the closed door, the knowledge that a particular configuration of your life is no longer accessible, that the future no longer contains the branch where you did not leave. The mind keeps testing this, keeps walking toward the door to check if it opens. It does not open. You already know it does not open. The mind will check again tomorrow, and the door will still not open, and eventually, gradually, without announcement, the checking will become less frequent. Not because you forget, because you learn in the body before you learn it anywhere else, that the door is simply part of the wall now. Living inside this is not the same as being trapped. Being trapped is a static condition, a person pressing against walls that press back. What you are doing is more like inhabiting a room you did not choose the dimensions of and are slowly learning to move through without catching on its edges. That takes time. It takes longer than 4 months. It takes longer than a night of working through it in the dark. But the learning is already happening. It has been happening since the morning after, in small increments, in the unremarkable dailiness of continuing. The steadiness that is beginning to arrive, not tonight, not completely, but in its first recognizable form, is not the steadiness of someone who has stopped feeling the weight. It is the steadiness of someone who has stopped pretending the weight belongs to someone else. Someone who has, in the quietest and most undramatic way, claimed the decision as theirs, not with pride, not with certainty, just with the particular unglamorous integrity of a person who is done looking for an exit from their own choices. The hands rest. The room holds its warmth. You are still here, inside what you made. That is, quietly, enough. And enough, for now, is all the night requires. The gray-blue light through the curtains is familiar now in a way it was not at the beginning of this. Earlier tonight it made the room look wrong, proportions slightly off, shapes rendered from memory rather than seen directly, the light of a space that did not know what it was. Now it is simply the light. The curtains filter the city the way they always filter the city. The shapes in this room are the shapes of your things, in the positions you put them. The room has not changed. You have been in it long enough to stop being disoriented by it. This is what familiarity feels like when it arrives not through comfort, but through time. 3 rotations. Click. 3 rotations. Click. The fan has been turning all night, but something has shifted in how you are hearing it. For the first 17 chapters, it arrived as evidence. Evidence of absence, evidence of a compromise that no longer needed keeping, evidence of the specific shape of what was lost. Now listen to what it actually is. A small motor turning blades at a speed that has nothing to do with you. The click that comes every 3rd rotation is a mechanical imperfection, a slight imbalance in the blade assembly, a thing that would cost $12 to fix and that you have learned to live with instead. It does not know what you did. It does not know what you are carrying. It turns because it was turned on. It will turn until it is turned off. The world proceeding with or without your resolution is not a cruel fact tonight. It is, at this hour, a steadying one. You have been standing over this all night with your hands full. That is what the 3 a.m. version of guilt requires, that you hold the question continuously, that you not put it down, as if setting it aside even for the duration of sleep constitutes some form of abandonment. It does not. The question will be exactly where you left it in the morning. It is not going anywhere. It has not gone anywhere in 4 months. Whatever remains unresolved tonight will remain available for resolution tomorrow or the day after, or whenever the mind is ready to work on it in daylight, with sleep in it, with the ordinary steadiness that is harder to access at this hour. Putting something down is not the same as letting it go. That distinction matters. You are not being asked to stop caring. You are not being asked to decide that none of it mattered, or that the weight you have been carrying all night was excessive, or that the person you left did not deserve more careful handling. You are only being asked to acknowledge that the night has a container, and the container has a limit, and you have reached it. The body already knows this. The body has been communicating it for the last 2 chapters. In the stilling of the hands, in the settling of the sternum's familiar pressure, in the weight of the mattress holding you with a specificity that is starting to feel less like evidence and more like gravity. Simple, reliable, indifferent gravity. The same gravity that holds everything else in place while the fan turns. 3 rotations. Click. The room continues. You are allowed to let it. And as you let it, the breath arrives. Not called, not managed, just the body taking air because a thought finished, and the thought used something up, and the body, without consulting anyone, replaced what was spent. This has been happening all night, between every thought, after every sentence that landed and required something from you. The breath has been arriving and departing quietly, without acknowledgement, doing its work in the background of everything else you were doing. You did not notice it. You were occupied. It did not need you to notice. The thought that just finished, let it go where thoughts go when they are done. There will be another. There always is at this hour, the mind producing one more thing to turn over, one more angle on the question that has no final answer tonight. And when that thought finishes, the breath will arrive again, small, involuntary, the chest lifting a fraction, the body marking the end of something the mind was working on. Not relief, not resolution, just the body taking its share of the air in the room, which is yours, which is warm with your warmth, which has been sustaining you through all of this without requiring anything in return. The breath has been present through the whole of it, through the daytime certainty and the 12 a.m. doubt, through the last conversation and the photo and the name arriving unbidden and the specific loneliness of grieving something you ended. Through every chapter of this night, the breath continued. It was there when you decided. It was there in the days after, when you were performing fine for people who were carefully watching. It is here now, in this room, in this gray-blue borrowed light, with the fan turning its 3 rotations and the click arriving and the city outside doing what the city does. The breath does not know what you did. This is not a metaphor. It is the plain, slightly absurd fact of having a body. The body does not hold verdicts. It holds oxygen and calcium and the particular warmth of a room absorbed over hours. It breathes in the presence of grief and breathes in the presence of certainty and breathes in the presence of this, whatever this is, this hour, this unresolved weight that has settled into something closer to stillness. The breath makes no distinction. It arrives because you are alive and continuing, which is all it has ever needed from you. The sternum's pressure is softer now, not gone, but no longer occupying the front of your attention. The hands are still. The body has grown heavier against the mattress in the particular way bodies do when they are approaching the threshold of sleep, not dramatically, just incrementally, gravity becoming more specific, the edges of yourself less defined and less concerning. Let a thought arrive. Let it move through. Wait for the breath that follows. That small, automatic punctuation, the body noting that one is finished. You do not have to do anything with what the thought contained. The breath already marked it. The body already registered it. Something was spent. Something was taken in. And the accounting that the breath keeps does not require your supervision. 3 rotations. Click. The breath arrives. You are being breathed through this. You always have been. And the body, which has been breathed through all of it, is beginning now to do the other thing it knows how to do. Feel the weight of the duvet across the hips, not the weight it carried earlier tonight when it was evidence, when the mattress, knowing the shape of one body, felt like a document of solitude, a record of what was missing. That reading required effort. It required the mind to be active, to be making meaning from sensation. The mind is quieter now. What remains is simpler. Wait. the specific, neutral, completely adequate weight of fabric across the widest part of the body, where the body is most itself, where the mattress receives the most of you. The body is heavy here. It has always been heavy here. Tonight, that heaviness is not a verdict. It is simply gravity, doing what gravity does, holding you in place while the rest of the night proceeds without requiring your participation. The mind has spent hours trying to be adequate to what happened, trying to hold it correctly, frame it accurately, find the language that fits the weight, locate the version of this that is livable. This is the mind's work, and it did it, imperfectly, incompletely, in the way that all such work is done at 3 a.m. in a room with borrowed light. The body was present for all of it. The body felt the dropping sensation in the gut, the pressure below the sternum, the restlessness in the hands, the warmth that couldn't locate its own edges. The body processed everything the mind processed in its own register, in its own language, without once asking for the question to be answered first. The body knew how to love. It learned the other person's rhythms, their temperature, the specific weight of their presence in a room. The body registered the misalignment before the mind was willing to name it, in the low-grade tension that never quite resolved, in the sustained effort of staying that the body was carrying long before the mind admitted what it caused. The body knew, with the intelligence that precedes language, that something was wrong. The body also knew, in the weeks after, how to begin the slow work of reorganizing around a different shape. It has been doing that work every night since. It does not require your supervision. It does not require the answer. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. The gray behind the eyelids, notice it, not dark, not the dark of the room, which has its borrowed light, its edges and shadows. This is a different non-color, the pale, specific nothing of eyelids against dim light, the visual equivalent of having stopped looking, of having given the eyes permission to mean nothing for a while, to rest against their own inside surfaces and report back nothing, because nothing is what the body needs from them right now. The weight of the duvet, the gray of the eyelid, the breath arriving and departing, marking the end of thoughts that are growing shorter now, further apart, less urgent. The body knew how to leave. It was the body that finally carried you out of the door you needed to go through. It knows now how to do this too. It is already doing it. It has been doing it since before you knew what it would have to carry. The breath comes. A thought arrives, smaller now, less urgent, more like an afterimage than a full thought. And the breath comes after it, and the breath is longer than the thought was. This is different from how it was at the beginning of the night, when the thoughts were large and the breath was catching up to them, arriving in their wake as punctuation for something that had used everything up. Now the proportion has inverted. The breath takes more time than the thought. The space between thoughts is wider than the thoughts themselves. Something is giving way, not dramatically, not all at once, but in the quiet arithmetic of a body that has been waiting patiently all night for the mind to finish. There is a particular guilt in falling asleep before the question is resolved. You will recognize it, the sense that sleep is a form of abandonment, that closing the case for the night is something the person you left does not get to do. that you owe the question your continued wakefulness as a form of penance. This is the guilt's last argument, and it is worth naming clearly. It is not a sound argument. The question will be exactly where you left it in the morning. It has been the same question for 4 months. It does not require a night watchman. It does not become easier or harder to answer based on whether you remained conscious in its presence until dawn. The decision was made. It was made with what you had. Your specific capacity, your specific courage, your specific understanding of what was wrong and what it would cost to name it. That decision does not change while you sleep. You will wake tomorrow as the person who made it, the same person who has been waking every morning for 4 months as the person who made it, and the work of living inside it will continue in the morning light, which is easier to do with sleep in you than without. The curtains hold their gray-blue pallor, the city still a low sound behind them, continuous, indifferent. The fan turns, 3 rotations, the click, unhurried, mechanical, not waiting for anything from you. The phone lies face down on the mattress where you put it hours ago. Still there, still holding what it holds, requiring nothing from you tonight. All of it will be there in the morning. None of it is going anywhere. The sternum is quiet now. The pressure that was there all night has settled to something barely perceptible, more like a memory of pressure than pressure itself. The hands are still, cooler now than they were, resting. The body has grown so heavy against the mattress that the mattress and the body have become a single fact, and that fact is simply here, horizontal, held. A thought. The breath after it. Slow. Longer than the thought. Another thought, smaller. The breath after it, longer still. You are allowed to stop now. Not because the question has been answered. Not because you have been absolved of the weight of having chosen. But because the night has asked everything it can ask, and the body already knows, with the intelligence that has always exceeded the accounting, that you are here, that you chose. That is enough to sleep on. The room already knew. It has been holding you through all of it, the certainty and the doubt, the name arriving unbidden, the photo face down on the mattress still at arm's reach, every rehearsal of the last conversation in the dark. And it is still holding you now, the same way it has held you every night since, without requiring anything to be different. The grief was real. The person was real. What you carried tonight was proportionate to what was actual. That is not a small thing. The guilt that does not know how to leave was, in its own exhausting way, proof that you knew what you were ending. The city is still outside, the low sound of it. Your city now, the one that became yours alone, continues without waiting for resolution. The curtains hold their pale gray. The fan turns. 3 rotations, the click. 3 rotations, the click. Somewhere below in the street, a night bus makes a stop. The doors open. No one gets off. The doors close. The bus continues. An ordinary thing, happening in a city that has no idea what tonight cost, that will continue tomorrow the same way it continued tonight. The city, receding now, still there. The fan turns. The curtains hold the light. The phone on the mattress, face down, still. The room warm with only your warmth. 3 rotations. The city, further now. Still there, the fan, the dark behind closed eyes, the breath. You are here,